Hello, everybody. Welcome back once again. Thank you for joining me today and joining us again today. My name is Jeremy, and this is the Crew First Culture podcast. And another guest that I'm excited to meet and to talk with today. I have Jarrod Sergi. How you doing?
I'm doing great, man. Thanks for having me. Good morning.
No problem. I'm excited. I've been looking forward to meeting you because, like I told you before we pushed record, I've gotten to know quite a few people that I look up to and that I have kind of become friends with, and several of them have brought up your name as far as friendship wise and as far as you being a mentor to them and being an inspiration to them. So I was like, well, if the people I'm looking up to look up to this guy, this is probably somebody I need to get a hold of and try to talk with. So I appreciate your time and look forward to getting to know you some.
Awesome. Yeah, same here. I appreciate it.
So, like I talked to you before we started, and like I've done with some other guests, you have been on a lot of podcasts. And so that being the case, I don't want to necessarily just try to, spend the whole time with you saying the same things as you do. So I will lead kind of anybody listening to a few of the ones that I have heard that I've really enjoyed, that also kind of dig into your your younger years, your military experience, and kind of what brought you to the fire service. And so some of those, definitely some of my favorites are Fit to Fight Fire podcast, Journeyman Fire podcast, Multiple Calls podcast, Weekly Scrap, and the Behind the Shield podcast.
Mhm.
And like I said, I've really enjoyed those, and kind of like I do with everybody, I listen to them and try to pick some things that maybe you just kind of glanced on and that I would like to dig further into. So
Yeah.
without me saying anything else further, how about you introduce yourself a little bit and we'll get going.
Sure. Yeah. So, like I said, my name's Jarrod. I'm a captain out here in Norfolk, Virginia, which is right in the Mid-Atlantic on the East Coast. Huge military town. That's how I ended up over here. I got stationed here and then transitioned to the fire department. So, I'm coming up. 2021 will be my 16th year in the fire department, and and that's it. I'm assigned to an engine company. I'm an engine company captain. I'm stationed downtown with an awesome crew, and we have an absolute blast. Um, Other than work, I'm married. I got two boys. They're here actually at my house right now with their two cousins, just running around, going crazy in and out of the house. But two boys, 7 and 4, and and that's me.
Awesome. Last week I had the honor of talking with Chief Frank Scuso, and that was
Oh yeah.
a lot of the conversation because, like a lot of people nowadays, your house is full of kids during the week,
Yep.
and so
Yep.
that has been an adjustment for sure. And he helped me kind of realize that just go with it. If
That's right.
if they come in and interrupt, okay, that's life.
Oh
But
yeah.
if
I can't
they're
tell you how many times I've been doing something like this, and like my son, he'll like he sees what I'm doing, he like creeps up from the
little
side, and he's like
little
popping up around my
cameo.
shoulder. Yeah, yeah. And it's funny.
Yeah,
I get a kick out of it.
no problem. So I guess where I would like to start is something I've found really interesting, and I've heard you kind of address the same as far as your story. My story, as far as where I'm at today, the social media that I am doing, the podcast that we're on right now, it really bred out of just a buildup of frustration and resentment for me, with varying circumstances. And if I'm not wrong, I believe that's kind of something you have talked about as well. So you have your trial by fire page, and just kind of speak to that, talk about your page, where it came from, where it's kind of evolved to, and go into that as much as you want.
Yeah, yeah, I will. So, like you mentioned, it just a lot of stuff. I think a lot of people like us were like-minded guys, and like a lot of things stem from frustration at times. And not that it was 100% frustration for me, but I was very fortunate. I've talked before about the kind of the upbringing that I've had in the fire department. Right, I've been really lucky to be surrounded by some pretty good folks, and I had a captain and most of the company officers I had, but one in particular for the longest time. I mean, he was just a solid guy, good firefighter, good captain, mentored us a whole lot. And then, you get away from that firehouse and you see that not everybody's fortunate enough to have that, and I just found myself saying like this guy's doing it the right way. This is the way it should be done. Why isn't everybody else doing that? It's a shame nobody else is doing that. Like they have an obligation to do this. And I just felt like I was like, I'm going to challenge my leadership. I'm going to challenge people to go out there and do those things that people were doing for me, and the things that I still today try to do for other people. So I was doing a lot of stuff just on my personal page, just kind of putting out frustrations and stuff. And just had a buddy was like, look, man, like just create a separate page and just try to reach the masses and just, spread your message and everything and just see what happens. And so that's what I did. And it just kind of took off. There was probably a lot of people that were feeling the same way as me and wanted to see the same things that I did. And it just grew from there. And, one day I'll never, I was just talking to a buddy of mine. He actually just got a deputy chief job in a neighboring city. It was like, hey, Justin, man, I'm thinking about putting this course together to help new company officers and, people that didn't have like a captain like I had, like what could they do to be better for their folks? And so I just created an outline and made a program. And I was like, I see these guys who go around to these conferences and teach, like, that's not me. I don't know if I could do that, and he's like, what the hell, man, just drop a submission. So I did it. And off I went. I'll never forget like the first time that I did my company officer program. I did it at a department about 30 minutes from here. And it was the guys that were in the class were awesome. I said, look, I'm not going to lie to you. Like, I'm not going to be that instructor who's like, don't ever tell students this is your first time. I was like, this is my first time doing this program. I think it's going to go like 8 hours. It could go 4. I could really screw this up. I said, but I would love to hear your feedback. Like, tell me what you love. Tell me what you hated. Do you think like, I'm not trying to waste anybody's time. Like, is this something that I could take and deliver in other places? And I got a lot of really good feedback from those folks. So I just started dropping the class and then it went away from there. I get the fortunate opportunity to get around the country and travel and teach and meet people. It's been great. Just getting out there and kind of spreading the message that I feel should be out there as far as the leadership at the company level and in the firehouse.
That's awesome. It's funny that you bring up that first time, because I'm in the early stages of that story right now. I'm lucky enough to, and I've spoken on him several times, but I'm lucky enough to have a driver that is super passionate, fired up, and inspiration in really all aspects of life. But he has kind of, I feel like almost like subliminally been pushing me to kind of get out of my comfort zone. So
Yeah.
he put in for both of us to teach a class at the Lake of the Ozarks this coming
Awesome.
July. And I have never done anything like that. I mean, I don't even know that I've ever really taught a class officially at my department level. So
Yeah.
it is a very daunting kind of thing off in the distance right now. And I will be that guy. I guarantee you, I don't know how it's going to go. So
Yeah.
we're just in the preliminary, brainstorming phase right now. But it's exciting. I love doing it with him because it's like those brainstorming sessions are so awesome. You're just bouncing ideas off each other and digging into deeper things that you don't normally talk about. And I've just really enjoyed the process so far. So
Yeah.
looking
And
forward to that.
it's good you take that approach, like, like I did, and like, hey, like give me your feedback. Like you want to hear that.
Yeah.
Some instructors don't want to hear that. And sometimes, if you ask for it, they're going to tell you, and it could sting at times, but it's stuff that you need to hear. Right. And then hopefully, like the students, like I've always been, if like an instructor's asked me like, hey, can I get some feedback? I really try to give them constructive feedback.
Honest.
It's like, hey,
Yeah.
this is just my opinion, but like, this is what I saw. This is what I think could really improve your program. And,
Yeah.
I would want somebody to do the same for me.
Yeah. And really that echoes in everything that, you stand for, that accountability.
Mhm.
And if you want to lead it right back into the actual fire service and your department and crew, you want that accountability coming from below, just like you expect them to be okay with it coming from you. And
Right.
so
Absolutely.
we can't really expect to get better at anything if we aren't able to lower our ego and have some humility and listen
Right.
to stuff like that. So
Yep.
I totally agree with that for sure. The I mentioned that kind of, and I've talked about it, my story wise, as far as the frustration goes. I really think that just like we're talking about it, just like I've said that, I've heard other people's stories almost mirror ours. There are so many people out there that not only the people that you hear about, but probably way more that are out there dealing with that frustration
Yep.
and not really knowing what to do with it. Kind of in that awkward phase of, this is where I'm at. I don't know what to do. I'm about to start doing something stupid because that resentment is building up.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of where I really like to share the message of, you're not the only one. There's so many
Yep.
positive outlets out there. And so beyond kind of what you're done, I mean, what has this platform done for you kind of in that area?
So it's allowed me, I think, when I get those people, like if you're talking about those folks that, because it's not like if you're not happy with your company officers, you're not happy with, I mean, it's not like you could just, hey chief,
Yeah,
tomorrow, I'm not going to show up at this station. I'm going to be, it just doesn't work that way.
yeah,
And, it's, I guess if anything, it's given me perspective, right? Like I remember being a young firefighter. I know what it's like to work for a company officer, and like I said, for the most part, I've always worked for good ones. But there's been short stints where I worked for some that I thought could be a little bit better. And the advice I would give someone today is, there's no easy way out. Like I can't tell them go to work, do this, and the next day you're going to feel great about going to work for that officer. That the sad reality is sometimes you just got to play the long game and wait people out. You can certainly request to get out of there, but my advice to somebody like that, and I see him too, is you know you have to make yourself the expert, and in the absence of somebody that you want to see like a company officer, then you fill the role, or challenge somebody else to fill the role. Like for example, I was at a station and I wasn't there long. I was probably there 8 months. um, I wouldn't say the captain that was there was a bad captain. He just was kind of, it's hard to describe, but just kind of disconnected. He didn't invest a whole lot of time into the crew. Not that he wouldn't if you asked him, but it just wasn't something that you know he had the initiative to just do. And so I had a captain that had that mindset. I had a crew that had some deficiencies. I had some stuff that I wanted to work on myself. And so it's like, what's stopping us? What's stopping us from, like, we can continue to say like, oh, this is a terrible captain. He doesn't do this. He doesn't take us out to train. But it's like, what can you do within your little circle of opportunity at that station? Like, could we take the truck around back and pull lines? Could we pull the ladder on back and throw ladders, even with the captain laying in the bunker room? Like, could we still go out and do all this stuff in the absence of that good leadership? And most times the answer is yes. And unfortunately, in some places, I found the answer is still no. Like I've heard stories, and it just like blows my mind. Of, I'll be talking to somebody on the phone, and I give them the same advice. Like, look, you've got to make yourself the expert. Like, if nobody is taking you out to teach you how to cut a hole in a roof, then you got to do it yourself. And I know that's difficult, but pull the saw out, look at it, fire it up, go online, read the tech manual, spec it out, bring some pallets into the station. What I mean, the information that's out there right now with social media and YouTube and training, I mean, it's hard to make excuses on I can't make myself better.
yeah,
Um, but I've heard stories where guys are like, yeah, my officers won't even do that. Like they won't even let us pull the truck around. They won't let us pull lines off the truck because we got to be, we got to be ready to go. And I just, like, my mind just melts. I'm like, I don't know
yeah,
how that's even tolerated by that person's leadership. One, but how that company officer could just think that's okay. And unfortunately for those people, I don't have a good answer for them, right? That's just the reality. It's like, man, you just got to work on making yourself the expert, play the long game, write a transfer letter, hopefully be out there soon, and find somebody in the department that you want to seek as a mentor, and try to get in their crew, their station, or whatever. But I mean, it's so hard. And luckily for me, I've never had to spend a long time in that position.
yeah,
But I'm the first one, like when I hear those stories, and I've had people come to me like, hey, I'm not happy where I'm at. Can I come down? And, I'd like to be part of your crew down there. I'm like, I would take it. Like, you step off the truck with a tool and a desire, man. And I could work with that, like, um, but there's only so many slots at every station wherever we're at. So you can't just take everybody.
Yeah.
But that's the best advice I have for anybody in that position is just, in the absence of good leadership, you got to step up, or somebody's got to step up and make yourself the expert. If somebody's not going to do it for you, you got to do it yourself.
Yeah. And you ended that kind of conversation right there with where I was going to go. And I know we haven't mentioned it yet, but you do have a great book out. I'm not done with it yet, but working my way probably about 2/3 of the way through, and that's No Nonsense Leadership. And I was going to have to paraphrase it because I don't have it right in front of me, but that's something you say in the book, in the absence of good leadership, be it, be that person,
Right. Yeah. Right.
want to do that. And I love that. And really that's all we can do. We can't make anybody above us be good officers. We can't make any below us, be motivated to do better. We just can make ourselves the best we can and hopefully inspire others around us.
Yep. It's just like, we talked about Chief Escuso, right? Step up and lead. Like you could either sit on the sidelines and do nothing, or it's like, I don't want to be in this position and I don't want others to be in this position. So why don't I step up, do something about it in my firehouse, and hopefully the other people that are around you will be influenced by that. They'll be inspired by that. They'll try to do the same thing that you're doing. And then, most places people don't stick around for extended periods of time in the fire service, right? They go to other firehouses, they go to other parts of the city, and now they're going to go out there and they're going to be kind of soldiers of your good leadership. They're going to try to emulate those same leadership principles and ideals that you did there where you were unhappy. So it's like, I say in my class, like leadership is like a diet, like you can't just expect to do something today. I can't expect someone to do something today in my firehouse and see an immediate result, right? Like we're not going to get the 8-pack abs. I'm not going to go downstairs and eat a salad and then like lift up my shirt like, yes, but it's the same way, right? Like I could be frustrated in a position, step up and lead, like the chief says, I could make a difference in my station. And then 6 months later, I might hear stories, or a year later, I might hear stories like, man, Jeremy's down the street at this other station. He's doing some good stuff down there. It's like, man, that's all. Like that should make you feel good. Like we took ownership where we could, and we took ownership in a place where, we thought maybe we were at a disadvantage, and now look what it's doing in other places. So it's frustrating. I mean, trust me, there's been times where I want to beat my head against the wall. Like, what in the hell is going on in this place? I have no control over some stuff,
Yeah, that's everything you're saying is like, yeah, exactly. I just keep shaking my head because I feel like I'm agreeing completely with everything you said. I think something interesting before I forget to kind of go back to something you said is you talked about you can't, if something bad is going on, a employee that's probably not up to standard, or an officer that's not kind of meeting what you want out of, you can't just change those pieces with the fire department. And that's kind of something that has been, I wouldn't say frustrating, but it like, I try to branch out with some business podcasts, some, business leadership podcasts, because there's some great ones out there
Oh, there
that
really are.
aren't,
Yeah.
fire service related. But that's kind of, you hear that a lot. Okay. If you try to get these pieces and they're not working, well, you need to find different pieces. That doesn't work for us.
No, right. Well, this is not corporate America.
Mess.
I'm not walking in tomorrow and firing a guy.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's definitely one area that you kind of got to just take it what it is, and pull other good things out of it. That's just something that we don't have the advantage of doing.
Yeah.
So.
There's something that I have to remind myself of at times. Like I've had people come to my station and, like performance, we mentioned performance, like maybe they're not at a performance level that I want them to be at. In my mind, I'm like, why isn't this person where they need to be? Who was our last officer? What do they do for him? Right? Like I start to throw these excuses out. Right. And I'm like, I don't have control over that anymore. Like they're in my station. So, you have to work with people right where they sit, right? They can't show up. And then there's this expectation of, well, they should just know what to do because they've been in the fire department for 5 years. That just doesn't work that way. Like, yeah, they should, but they're not. And if they're in your station, you got to work with people right where they sit, and you got to take the time to understand that leadership is a diet, and sometimes improving people's performance levels is similar to a diet. Like, you have to slowly chip away at it. You're not going to get a result next week. You have to understand that, you know, if they come to your station and you're frustrated with their performance, and then 2 weeks later they do something and you're frustrated with their performance, it's only been 2 weeks. Like, you have to recognize that this is going to be a long term, a couple months, 6 months, a year. And then you may surprisingly find yourself 2 years later, like, oh man, it's been a couple years, and firefighter Joe is actually doing really good. And it's because you took the time to understand that everybody has a different gas pedal, everybody learns in a different way, and you just have to understand that and not get super frustrated by it.
Yeah. I think it's important for us to really understand that it doesn't matter. Like you said, it does not matter what happened from today to who knows how far back in the past.
Yep.
It doesn't matter if it was a bad officer. It doesn't matter if he wasn't motivated. It doesn't matter. What matters is who you have, and you have to own the responsibility of making them better from that point. And that's all we need to worry about for sure. Something, and that's kind of goes into kind of where my journey is right now. This year has been a struggle for everybody. You don't have to discuss why. It's been a struggle in many, many ways. And so that being said, man, I have learned so much. I've been humbled so much. I have failed so much. It's like a constant roller coaster. But the where I'm at right now is really trying to focus on the whole mindset of don't let what you can't control you.
Oh
You
yeah.
come into work. Okay, the chief put out 17 new COVID list rules. Okay,
Yeah.
we make 14 COVID calls where we have to gown up and out. Okay, whatever. Like Jocko says, no factor. Good,
Yeah.
whatever.
Right.
I'm just done with all of it. And no, I'm not perfect. And yes, I'm going to struggle with those things still. It's
Sure.
still going to frustrate me, but I just don't care to worry about it anymore.
Right.
It doesn't affect us as far as I can't make it any better. What I can do is go from that point and just focus on what we can make better. And so,
Right.
what any other thoughts on that? I'm sure you agree with that, but
Oh yeah, I agree 100%. And as the officer, it starts with you, right? Like,
yeah,
and the crew will feed off of that. I mean, if I came into work every day in a lineup, there's, we're in the same boat, man. Like, there's like, especially when COVID was new, like, oh my gosh, this thing is changing every 6 hours,
yeah,
So I have a choice. I can get up in front of that crew and I could say, oh,
mm,
great. Here we go again with the chief. Blah, blah, blah. And we got to do this, that, and the other. And what are they going to do? Yeah, damn right, Cam. This is
yeah,
BS. But they're going to do the same thing. Or I can get up there and say, no, we're just using code. But it could be anything like, hey, chief said this, blah, blah, blah. This is what we're doing. So this is what I expect to see you guys do. If there's any questions, like, that's the way it goes. Like, you have to
yeah,
deliver that. You don't have, and I tell my guys all the time, right? I said, look, I don't expect you to like it, but I expect you to do it. Simple as that. Like, you don't have to like what we're doing, nor do I have to like it, right? What we got to do it. That's kind of how this fire service structure works, and it's worked well for a lot of years, you know. So absolutely, they will feed off that. So, if I'm around griping about what's going on in the other station, and they know that stuff frustrates me, like I'm a human being like anybody else. They see that, and I get my days where I'm totally guilty of just getting caught in the moment and griping
yeah,
about what's happened over here and over there. But if I make that a habit, so will they, and they're going to think that that's okay to do. So I try my best to not do that, and not like you said, not let the things that are outside of my control me, because they're going to do the same thing in the station, and that station's become toxic, and we're going to spend our day talking about other things or other people as opposed to talking about things that make us better as a station.
yeah. And I can't remember who I was talking with, but another episode I had a guest, and kind of this same conversation was going. And I'll be really honest, the struggle I'm having with this mindset right now is been very much complicated by the fact that I allowed what you just said. That was me. And that was during this whole, where we started this conversation, that time period that I was dealing with a lot of frustration, a lot of resentment for, lots of different reasons. And that was the environment that I wouldn't really say unknowingly because I knew it, but I created. And I didn't want to create that, but that's exactly what was happening. I was showing my frustration with every single thing that was going on. I was showing my irritation at every single thing, every single person above us. And man, I created a terrible environment and I had nobody to blame but myself. And now I am in a fight for my leadership life to
Right.
get away from that. And it's hard. And that's
Oh, yeah.
something, to really think about for people out there that are allowing that is hopefully you will come to your senses someday. And when that comes, you are setting yourself up for a long, hard road to get back.
Right. Right. Because it affects your credibility, right? It's like if you try to ask your people to do this or do all the stuff that we're talking about, and they're like, well, wait a minute, Jarrod didn't do any of that stuff. It is hard, man. And trust me, I'm not, I would be a hypocrite if I told you I didn't sit around the galley table and like totally gripe about things that I had zero control over and spin people up. Like, you know, I have, right? I think anybody listening, I would bet that the majority of people listening to this podcast have probably done the same.
Oh,
It happens. It gets the best of all of us, But I think if once you're in that role and it's like, man, I got to crawl out from underneath all this stuff. It's just, hey, like you share your experiences with other people, or you see that in other people. It's like, hey, man, look, I see what you're doing. I get it. I've done the same thing, and this was the outcome. Like, just take it from me. I've made these mistakes. I've fallen on my face. It created this in a firehouse. I think one, hopefully they learn from it, and then two, just shows your humility, right? It's like, hey, I'm willing to admit that this probably wasn't the right approach, and this is why. And I think people, I mean, I hope people would respect anybody for being upfront
yeah,
about something like that.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And just like you're saying, we're all human. If we're a human that is doing this the majority of the time, okay, that's one side of the coin that okay,
Hmm.
we need to change. We need to flip that coin over. If we're the humans that are on the other side of that, that are trying to do good, trying to speak a message against it, that doesn't mean that we are living that message every single
Right.
day, and that's okay. And, it's okay to say that. It's
Yep.
okay to post that on social media, and it's okay to show, hey, I want to be a positive person. I want to preach a positive message, but I fall sometimes too,
Yeah, of
because
course.
people like to hear that too. And
Oh yeah, absolutely.
the one big area that I really want to dig into because I feel really strongly about, and I feel like it's an area that we really need to get better at as a fire service, just in general. It something you talk about quite a bit is company officer involvement in training.
Mhm.
And hell, this can go, this could be an 8-hour conversation just by itself,
Right.
which is fine. I don't care if
Yeah.
this if we end up with this, it's fine. But I think we really need to do a better job being involved, not only in just making sure we are training, but be involved in the training. Know
Right.
what you're doing so that you can be the person teaching it to others, not just depending on somebody else to teach it. So let me hear kind of some thoughts of yours.
Oh yeah, I got a bunch. It's funny you say this because I had a conversation yesterday. I was on the Chiefs car. I started acting up on the Chiefs car, so I got around the stations the other day within the battalion, and we were talking about, and I'll just lead off with this. We were talking about drivers in particular, and we're kind of updating our task books. So in Norfolk, we have paid drivers. Like that's you have classes, you take a test, you get selected, and that's what you do. That's all. You're just a driver. And then of course, other people once you get on probation, you could do like a task book, and you could drive in the absence of the driver. If the driver's on leave, you bump up, you drive.
Yeah,
And so we're kind of overhauling our task book, and we're trying to create a better process and get more up to date and better information out there. And so I was having a conversation with one of the drivers who was a good driver, and he was saying stuff like, well, you can't hold the same standard as the backup drivers as you do the full time, because they don't get the experience and they don't, it's like, yeah, I get it. But every time, the whole time, the conversation kept pointing back to the officer, or at least I kept steering it back to the officer, right? I said, look, I'll tell you this. I have a full-time driver, all right? And he drives 24 hours every time we're there. And the only time other people are bumping up to drive is when he's on leave, right? Which isn't a whole lot. But if we go to a fire and it's the backup driver and they make a mistake, and I said, hey, if they came up to you and they said, if you're the captain, right, and they came up to you and said, hey, look, I know I made all those mistakes, but I'm just the backup guy. That would not fly where I work. And I told him, I said, and the reason it wouldn't fly is, and the reason it shouldn't fly in other places is because it's the officer's responsibility, right? At what point does that become an excuse, right? The officer has to get involved. Like, I don't care if you're a backup driver or a full-time driver, the standard is the same. The expectation is the same. The training is the same. I provide you the same resources. So there shouldn't be any excuses. Like, I'm not going to say that isn't a value to doing it every day. I'm not saying that whatsoever. But I can't prepare for every single incident. I can't prepare for every single experience that they might run into with troubleshooting or pump failure or whatever. But I can certainly provide them the tools and the resources and the training to do so, or I could just sit in my bunk room all day and you maybe only see me when it's time to eat, So the officers have to get involved in training, and you hit the nail on the head, right? Like, they have to develop themselves along the way. Now, is that something I have control over or you have control over? Not a whole lot, right? But damn it if some of them chiefs don't, right? And they could see those folks that have done nothing to develop themselves along the way. And if they reward them with a promotion, it should be no surprise to anybody that they're not going to do anything for those people that are assigned to them, right? So, the company officer getting involved, it shows that you care. It shows that you have credibility. It shows that you're competent, right? Like, people will lose faith in an officer. Like, hey, let's go out and, it could be any training topic. Let's go out and do this. And then they can't even show the firefighters in the station how to do a skill or teach them or provide some type of knowledge that doesn't instill a whole lot of faith in those firefighters, right? And firefighters aren't dumb folks. They're going to see right through that stuff, and they're going to either trust you or they're not going to trust you. So I think if, this is going way back, is like, if you have an aspiration to be a company officer, you better start developing yourself to be a good firefighter, because and how to manage people and lead people, because ultimately that's what you're going to do. And if you can't provide that training and those tools and those expectations for those folks, then you're going to fail, and you're going to cause them to fail. And not every station is going to have self-starters. Not every station is going to have that person to step up and do something. Like, they're going to have to count on you, and they're going to feed off your leadership, and they're going to feed off your knowledge. And if you can't provide anything for them, then that station's bankrupt, unfortunately. So the company I have to, and I would say the flip side of the coin is, like we talked about earlier, not everybody has that. Some people just don't know what they don't know, right? I truly believe that there's some company officers out there that they get promoted, they want to do the right thing, but maybe they didn't have that environment, and it's not because they didn't want it, they just didn't have it, right? And so they find themselves in a position where they maybe have firefighters challenging their leadership. Well, now it's their time to step up. Like, if my firefighters were constantly coming to me and saying, hey Cap, like, let's go out and do some engine company stuff, or let's go talk about hydraulics, or let's, if I'm assigned to a ladder and they're asking me questions on search and ventilation, and I have a very uncomfortable feeling of, man, like, I don't really have any good answers to this, or what should I should fix that, right? Like, I need to go get in the books. Maybe I should go take some classes. The information is out there, especially this year, right? Online webinars. It's crazy. So it's like, go take individual responsibility and develop yourself. So now you can develop the crew. And I believe that if the crew sees that in you, they'll appreciate it. And up goes your credibility, and up goes your trust, right? Like, you're taking an active role in the development of yourself first, so you can take an active role in their development as well. So you can't just be spectators, right? We got to get out there, get involved. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. Like, it's okay to fail as the officer, right? That, like, there's no rule book that says you can't go out there and make mistakes. So if you're out there doing drills with your crew and you're afraid that, oh man, if I screw up this drill or I do this wrong, the crew's going to think anything less of me, I would think less of an officer that just sat in their office or laid in their bunk while the crew was out there drilling, as opposed to an officer that got out there, put the gear on, got dirty, sweated with us, and failed a bunch of times. Hey, Cap, wait, let's fix this. Let's figure out a way. That's how you build that credibility and develop your folks.
And I like that piece of it too. I mean, you ended with that kind of that statement, and there's a lot to dig in before that, but since that's where you ended it, I like that piece of the whole conversation as far as what we gain as officers towards our crew. And it's almost like, okay, you can view it as a lose-lose. We go out there and we screw something up. It's like, what? You're an officer, you've been here 20 years and you can't even do this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Or if you do it really good, it's like, okay, well, he's showing off. Well, that's one way you can view it, but really
Sure.
you need to view it like, okay, you go out there and do it good, and you're gonna inspire somebody else to try harder, because
Mm-hmm.
my officer is not going to do better than me at firefighting than
Right.
me as a firefighter. Or if that officer messes up, then it's like, my officer, he goes out there, he does firefighting skills, even though that's not his job, even though he messes up some, but if he's doing it and not scared to mess up, then I don't have any excuse. You know what I mean? Kind of,
Right.
that's a better way of viewing that. And I love that piece of it. That is probably one of the more important parts of this conversation for me, is just that example you're setting being out
Absolutely. Yep. And we talk a lot about leadership, but there's got to be some followership too, right? Like, like you don't want to see your officer fall on their face, so like if you're really good at something and you see that they're not, like as a follower, you have an obligation to fill in those gaps of your leadership, right? Like if you see your company officer struggling with something, help them out. Like, we can sit around and say, man, this officer's really terrible or whatever. But the one assignment that I described to you that I was in for a short time, I had some moments like that where I felt like, man, this captain is off. I have a choice. I could do nothing to help the guy out, or I could say, hey, Captain, let me show you something. Check this out. I was watching this video. Like, I'm gonna go out back and show you this stuff and help him out. Because again, some people don't know what they don't know. You might show them something and they're like, oh damn, like I've never seen that before. That's pretty awesome. Let's try this, and the ball gets rolling, and then you build that mutual respect, you build that trust, build that credibility. So you have an obligation, I think, as a firefighter to help fill in the gaps. I'm not saying do their job. That's not what I'm saying at all here. They have the responsibility to do that. That's their job. That's why they were promoted. But throw them a bone every now and then. Hey, let me show you something. Let me take you out back and show you this.
Yeah. With that, you've said it a couple times that you don't know what you don't know. That was kind of me as well. I'm trying to think here. I think I've been a station officer for 3 years now, almost 3 years. And up to a year and a half ago, that was me. I was the guy in your book that you talk about. We want to work for him because he takes care of his guys. But really, all he's doing is, he's got their back if something comes up, but he's not really preparing them for anything. You know what I mean? That
Sure,
kind
yeah.
of situation. And it wasn't until I got a brand new firefighter out of the academy on my crew that almost like punched me in the face to say, dude, you are responsible for this person's career. You got to step it up.
Yeah.
And that was the spark that started all of this. And I think sometimes that's just, people sometimes just need that spark, whatever it is. It's not that they're bad officers or bad firefighters. They have all the tools. They just need something to kind of kick them in the right direction.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was the starting point, and that's really started all this. And man, I take that responsibility very seriously. It's a big deal.
It is a big deal, and I don't know if I mentioned it in my book. Like when we do a promotional ceremony, and I say it all the time now, like when I teach, like my deputy chief says it at every promotional ceremony. He mainly says it to new lieutenants, and he says a lot of things, but he's like, one thing I'm going to leave you with is as a firefighter, not that you weren't responsible for a lot of things. He's like, but as a company officer, you're now responsible for people and you're responsible for outcomes. Right? You're responsible for outcomes. And first time I heard that, I was like, man, he's way right. Like I'm not just responsible for putting a line at the front door anymore. I'm not just responsible for getting this ladder in place the right way. Like ultimately, I guess I still am, of course, right? Um, but I'm responsible for outcomes, like not only the outcome of an incident, but the outcome of a person, an injury, a fatality, a career-ending injury. Like that's a big deal for me, and if it's not a big deal for other company officers, something's got to happen to make them realize that they are now responsible for outcomes when they go to work every day.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. That's just there are so many things about being an officer. It's hopefully there's not many people that are this way, but a lot of people just enjoy that power, enjoy that
Oh yeah, sure.
the place.
Yep.
But there are so many heavy things that you are truly responsible for, and it's crazy to think that some people take that or take advantage of that and just
Yep.
take it for
They
granted.
absolutely do.
uh one I don't talk a lot about chief perspective. I'm not a chief. I've never been a chief,
Mhm.
obviously, a battalion chief or anything like that. But I think it's worth bringing up in this conversation as well, that I feel it's equally important for those battalion chiefs, especially people that are involved in crews and personally over people in suppression and that to be a part of training as well. And so
Yes.
there's so many things you gain out of that, just like they might be different advantages that a station officer would gain, but to not have any idea what your crews are capable of, what they're good at, what they're struggling with. I just feel like that's a bad place to put yourself and
Yeah.
your shift. Do you kind of feel the same way?
Yeah. Absolutely. I don't think it's any different than a company officer getting involved. Now, I'm not a chief, but I can see, I try to view things through the lens of a chief at times, and I'm like, what an opportunity you have as a chief officer to get around to your stations. And if somebody has a problem throwing a ladder or putting a line in service or pumping a truck, whatever the case may be, it's not like you're going to go to that person and say, you need, like, hey, Captain, this is what I want to see. What are you working on? How are you doing anything? Like you could do the same thing to those company officers as a company officer could do to those firefighters. And, there is so much more to being a chief officer than delivering the mail. I think you can just go around and make your station visits. And, if you see more of the inboxes and outboxes than you do what the crews are doing, that's a problem, you know? And the guy that I mentioned, my captain, Brandon, for a long time, the guy I mentioned in the book, he's a chief officer now, and he's doing those same things. Like, nothing is stopping a chief. The at least where I come from, the chiefs and most battalion chiefs in departments are at the absolute linchpin of change and opportunity. That like it hinges on them, right? Um, and if they're not out there, like if I'm pulling up the calendar, I'm like, oh, station one's doing some pump drills, station seven's doing some tech rescue stuff this afternoon, and I'm gonna pop in there instead of just, I don't know, sitting in my office and I don't know. I don't know what they do, but let me get out and go out and do it. And I'm certainly not marginalizing the job of a chief, but I have a small snippet of what they do just because I act up on the car, and I'm like, man, what an opportunity these folks have, and some do a really good job. I'm not. If it
Yeah.
sounds like I'm dooming
Oh,
and glooming these chiefs, there are fantastic ones out there.
yeah.
In fact, we had a chief. We just lost him. He went up to an admin position. The guy was a rock star, and he's that guy. He's great attitude, approachable, shows up in training, cares about training, was a good captain, was a good firefighter, so I had that luxury of having that type of chief, and people feed off of it, just like they feed off you as the captain, they feed off that chief. And it's like, man, this is a great chief to have. We trust him. He's out there. He's seeing what we're doing. He knows what we're capable of. So the chiefs absolutely have to get involved. And, I don't know, in some organizations, I feel like when people make chief, it's like they get that SCBA off their back and they feel like they've reached this finish line where it's like, I don't have to get involved in the companies anymore. It's like, no, 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 no. Yeah, you still do. You got to know what's going on with your crews.
Yeah, and absolutely. And I don't, I don't feel like you are thinking this, but I don't bring this up 2-point fingers, or
No.
down the battalion chiefs of America. But I mean, that I truly completely agree with you. I feel like it is a parallel comparison to what we are responsible for
Hmm.
with our crew. I mean, they truly can build trust and build respect, and there's so much to build by having those people out there. And yeah, put a pack on them. I, I don't even want to get into it, because these podcasts are such a delicate balance.
Yeah, they are.
You
Yeah.
you don't want to
Yeah.
ever say things that incriminate you.
Yeah. Right.
But I can't tell you the last time I have seen a chief of any level with a air pack on.
Hmm.
I don't even know that I can remember one in full gear that maybe just wasn't because it was cold outside. You know what I mean? And
Yep.
again, we're not down and you know we're not down anybody. We're just pointing out that these are areas that we need to get better.
Right.
And really, before I became an officer, I started creating kind of my vision, and I wasn't even really intending it to be that way, but that's my mind just started creating kind of the vision, and the culture that I would like to have one day. And I think that's kind of where I'm at right now. I have no interest in becoming a battalion chief right
Hmm.
now, none. But it's not stopping my mind from already kind of working in the realm of, if that was me, what I would like to do, or what I
Right.
feel like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. I think the same way. And we're doing a Chiefs process starting in February, and I'm not doing it. Not that I don't ever want. Yeah, I'm not ready personally. I don't feel like I'm ready to be a battalion chief. I just started acting on the Chiefs car. Like I'm a total rookie at it. I have a lot to learn. There's no way I am professionally ready to do that. To me, I take that responsibility very seriously. Like, to me, that's a big deal, and I don't know how people. I mean, there's people promoting battalion chief that they struggled as firefighters, and it's like again, the development thing is not there, and it's like, oh, I don't know if they just want to get that SCBA off their back or what it is, but I'm not there yet. Like, I like being able to create a culture in a station, and I think a chief could do that too. But I like my position as a captain, and for me, I want more credibility, right? Like, I've been a captain for, I guess this is 21, it'll be 4 years. I mean, that's a fair amount of time, but I feel like I still have a lot to learn,
Yeah.
and I'm just not ready to get on that car. But I could see the opportunity that the Chiefs have to get involved and set the example, no different than a station officer. And the Chiefs that wear SCBAs, there's about four that come to mind that I've seen wear SCBAs in training. One's our fire chief now. The other three, one is the captain that I worked for a long time, who's now a battalion chief, and then two other battalion chiefs that I've worked for as company officers. Them, and like, out of all our battalion chiefs, those are the four. And then there may be some. I've only ever been on one shift when I worked,
Yeah.
so there could be more, of course, but I would say they're the minority. I think that most of them, they're just not doing that, and I think it is, and people can call it unfair or whatever they want to call it, but I really feel like the battalion chief position is a finish line for a lot of people. Like, they're off the company. They don't really feel like they need to get involved in that kind of stuff. And, you know, I love, I don't know if you ever listened to or taken any Nick Martin's classes, but I mean, great instructor, phenomenal material. And he says all the time, like, I wish chiefs were just as passionate about being chiefs as company officers and firefighters were about being that. And if they were, our fire service would probably improve overnight. But yeah, they have the same obligation and responsibility as company officers as far as influence and example and things like that, being involved.
Yeah. And even more importantly, kind of you touched on earlier, that is a critical point of they have that influence and that connection, but they also have the power to make change. And
Absolutely.
that's an incredible balance there to have. So
Oh
it's
yeah.
a very
And the
important
way our
spot.
department is structured, and I'm sure it's similar to most, is, I said before, the battalion chiefs are those linchpins of
Yep.
change. So a lot of times what happens, or sometimes, not a lot, the fire chief and the deputy chief will have this expectation of a behavior or a skill or something. There's the expectation that the firefighters and the company officers implement those things, right? So we'll hold drills and in services and things like that to get the company, the people on the line up to speed. And guess who many times is absent from those things? The battalion chiefs. That's just the reality in a lot of places. So when we go out to these incidents, you have the line firefighters doing something. They understand the expectation, but you have the battalion chief that has been disengaged and they don't know what's going on. So there's no implementation of those things, and there's this disconnect. And the battalion chiefs are absolutely the conduit between both.
Yeah, and I think it, and again, I, I almost feel awkward talking about this because I have no experience, but it almost feels like to me, just giving it an opinion, it almost feels like to me that it's becoming, or they try to prioritize at an administrative almost role more,
Mhm.
that sucks up time that they need to be spending in the field with their people. And it's almost like anything else, my family or whatever I'm doing with my time. I've got to put the priority where it needs to be. And if you don't prioritize that correctly, then somebody else is going to. And I feel
Absolutely.
like maybe that's the problem. It's not that these people aren't doing anything. Battalion chiefs are super busy always.
Oh yeah.
It's just that
Yep.
we got to prioritize that a little bit better.
And it depends on the structure. Like I can remember talking to a battalion chief, or was it a captain? I might be screwing this up, but their battalion chiefs were so bogged down with. I mean, they're like, yeah, battalion chiefs have to do this, that, and the other. Like, I was like, holy cow! Like, and they were just the way their department was structured. I mean, their battalion chiefs had a ton of responsibility, and it left little room. Like one of the guys was like, chief, he's like, I try to get out there, I try to get involved in training and get out to visit the companies. He's like, but I have this other stack of things that just keep piling on my desk because as a battalion chief, I'm doing evals, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. Like, and it's like, holy cow! Like, I was like, and then the captains were saying the same things, and I think it was a smaller department, so a lot of stuff piles on their shoulders. And this captain was like, I got to do all these number of things. I got to run the shift. I got to do all that. I'm like, man, as a captain, I show up to the station. I just run the firehouse. I don't get involved in any of that stuff. So that's a benefit for me. So you're right. I'm not a chief. I don't, you know, I'm just not. I have a little glimpse into what they do because I act on the car, but it's not the same thing, right? But I think like anything else, you got to find balance. Like you gotta find a way to say, you know what, I'm going to push myself away from the desk. I'm going to take an hour, and I think you can carve out an hour and go do something. One of my friends, I can't speak highly enough about the guy. His name is Dennis Stone. He's a recently retired fire chief from Boise, Idaho. He's the fire chief, right? He's got a million things on his plate every day, right? Every Friday for 4 hours during his duration as a fire chief, he goes out and he goes out and he visits the companies. He has breakfast. He'll go on calls and things like that. So I'm like, you know what? The fire chief can carve out time to do that. I'm pretty confident. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty confident a battalion chief can carve out an hour out of a couple weeks to go out and just pop in a training incident, pop into the firehouse, have a cup of coffee with the guys, and say, hey, what's going on? What's new? You guys need anything? Like, be involved, right?
Yeah, and that's it's a perfect kind of perfect opportunity to kind of segue into another topic that I'd like to get with you on. And we have that opportunity that anybody that says you don't have time for something, it's you're just not making time. You're choosing what to do with your time, and you can't say that. You
Mhm.
can prioritize things differently. And I've been very open about that. It's been a struggle for me. I tend to mess prioritizing my time up a lot. And so, I've heard you talk a little bit about kind of that work family balance, and something that you refer to as kind of integration with that. And kind of go into a little bit of what you mean by all
Yeah.
that.
So the first time I ever heard that was from an Air Force colonel, and he says, there's no such thing as balance. He's explaining. He's like, no such thing as balance. If you're tipping the scale in one direction, you're ignoring the other one, and if you're tipping the scale back the other way, you're. So he's like, you have to find ways to integrate. And in the fire service, that means involving your spouse in what goes on in the firehouse, getting. If you travel and you teach, like for me, there's been plenty of times where it's like, oh, I'm going to San Diego to teach at firehouse or whatever. And it's like, well, let me take my wife with me. Like, show her what this is all about. Let her know like what I'm always geeking out about, and show her the conference hall. And I mean, my wife has sat through some of my lectures, so she sees kind of where my passion comes from and why I do what I do. So I think that's what's important when it comes to that work life, balance, if you will, is the key to, I think, a healthy balance is that integration, right? Like how can I weave my family into my work, and how can I weave my work into my family? And other times you got to know when to just kick that stuff away. Like, I'm not always the best at it, but I try to not, and I try to not bring my work home. When I come home, I'm off, right? I try not to spend a lot of times working on projects. Like, I'm always taking stuff on at the fire department. So I'm like, I try to prioritize and manage things where when I'm at the firehouse, I work on those things. When I'm at home, I come home and I just want to focus on my boys, my wife, hanging out, and I kind of shove that stuff off to the side. I'm not always the best at it. I'll fully admit that, but I try. And I think, again, the inclusion of your work at home, talking about it. For me, it's easy. My wife's a nurse, so it's easy for me to come home and talk about work stuff. A lot of the same things that in the fire department they deal with in nursing, and as far as structure and leadership and frustrations and things like that. Um, but again, that integration, including your family and things, and I think that's important. And knowing when to leave the work stuff at work. There's going to be decisions. I had to make a recent decision about going in on an admin assignment and how it was going to affect my family life, my home. And it's like, man, I really want to do this for my department. I really want to do this for my chief, but it's going to affect things at home. And as much as you may love the fire service, I'm one of them, right? When you walk away from the fire, you could retire tomorrow and no one's going to call you and say, hey man, did you hear about that fire they had on B shift? Hey man, did you hear about the promotion? Once you're gone, you're gone. You're not leaving no vacuum anywhere. I don't care. You could do great work, and we always try to leave things better than we found it. But I am confident in knowing that the day I leave Norfolk Fire Rescue, they're not going to be like, man, we got some stuff we need. Should we call Jared? But it doesn't work that way, So put your family first, right? In the decisions that you make, you got to put your family first. Whether that's assignment you're doing at work, whether it's something long term. Your family's always going to be there. The fire department is not. And I'm not saying don't dedicate yourself 100% to your work. We want to see that out of people, but don't forget you know, don't forget your family. Your family comes first, no matter what.
Yeah. Yeah, that's something that I've really kind of gotten to enjoy here lately. My wife has, I'm trying to think how long she's been in kind of a supervisory role here probably the past year and a half. So
Hmm.
kind of along the same lines of time that I have been going through all of this journey, this experience for myself. She has been, in that transition as well. And some of the kind of, I don't know, coolest, I guess I would say, conversations we've had are been about leadership. And it's
Yeah.
almost weird. I don't know why it's weird, but having a leadership conversation with your wife, it just doesn't seem like that's just a normal thing. But
Right. Right. No, I
you
get
know,
it.
if you're both in those roles, if you both enjoy what you're doing, why not? Why not have those conversations?
Hmm.
My wife's a nurse too. I think seems like 80% of firefighters are married are married
Yeah.
to nurses.
Yeah. The other
But
20
yeah,
teachers, I think.
yeah, yeah. But yeah, that has been a good chance to do exactly what you're saying.
Yeah. Right.
Enjoy my time with family and still, you know, kind of bring in that fire service as well. And so that's been a good time for us, I would
Yeah.
say.
And I think, I try to at least once a year. We try to, my wife and I, like we totally disconnect, right? Like we go off the grid. Like we go out and we get a cabin in the mountains. Like I don't look at my phone. It's like there's no service. I love it. So it's like
Yeah.
for a week, I'm off the grid. I'm not doing anything work related. It's just 100% focused on my kids, my wife, my family, going out and doing stuff. And I just think that is healthy to not only, not only for your relationship and your marriage and your kids and everything else, but for your work in general. Cause like you're able to pump the brakes and you're able to hit the reset button and you're able to disconnect. I think you got to have that, man. Like I think people that get too focused in on work, 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 and they can't hit that pause button, they start to see problems at home, and they struggle at home with their spouse and their kids, and there's relationship problems. And those relationship problems come into the firehouse. I have guys in my firehouse that are married, and I would be the first one to tell them, like, hey, look, and there's been times since I've been there with that crew, like, hey, look, they'll come to me with a problem, and I'm supposed to do this cap, and I'll tell them, like, look, your family comes first. Like, this can wait. You don't need to do this. Focus on your family first. We'll get to whatever we were working on later. That is not the priority here. Like, we can figure that out, but you need to focus on your family, you know?
Absolutely. And like I talked to, basically told Chief Fiskey, so I love fire service talk. I love culture
Mhm.
talk. I love leadership talk. But I also just I love talking to people that love their family and
Right.
love to talk about their family. I mean, it's just like the leadership stuff kind of absorbs into you from others. That love for their family absorbs into you as well. And I enjoy surrounding myself with people like you that are passionate about fire service, but are also passionate about their family, and
Yep.
you kind of get inspired two ways there.
Oh, absolutely. It gets, traveling around to conference and stuff. I don't know if you've taken anything with Jonas Smith. He says, show me your family and I'll show you your success. Right. So, you know, on the surface, we may see somebody, it's like, man, they're going around the country, they're teaching fire service stuff. They're like, this is amazing, they're doing great things. But show me your family. Like, if that isn't in order, then not that the other stuff isn't good for you, but it just that something's off in your universe and it's got to get right. You know, the family has to be squared away first. It's great to be out and traveling. I could be in California or Florida or out teaching in Indianapolis, and like there's guys in the car FaceTiming their kids and their wife, and it's like that's what you want to see. You want to see that they still have that connection, and that's what's important to them.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll take this chance to kind of take a step to the side and kind of get into a few things that I would like to ask you as far as the book, if that's all right.
Okay, sure.
And and like I said earlier, I'm not done with it yet, but I've definitely pulled a lot out of it. I've enjoyed this book. It's especially the past couple chapters I've read. I needed to hear. There's some areas that I am definitely weak at, so they've been helpful to me. And I guess trying to look at my notes here real quick. So really something that I liked is and I'll just read it out of the book so I'm not paraphrasing, but it says this leadership journey is a constant learning process for me. I succeed, I fail, I regret decisions at times, but I stand behind most. And that's kind of, I said it earlier. I feel like that's the life I'm living right now, man. I gain a little confidence and feel like, okay, I made a good step here for a day or a week or a month, and then boom, I get punched right in the face. And
Right.
that the humility comes in because I failed, and I'm not doing this or I'm not doing that, and it's just constant. And is has that been basically your journey throughout your time as an officer? Would you would say?
Yeah, the constant, like, ebb and flow there, where it's like, man, there's definitely been times where like self-reflection is important, right? Like, I'll do something or I'll make a decision and I'll be sitting in my office and it's like, man, I really screwed that up, and um so there are times, and I think if I can encourage, like, leadership is definitely like, nobody's got it figured out. Like, I'm still learning, obviously, as I go and as I make those mistakes. But the reason that I stand by them is because, you know, I think, you know, part of that reflection and that emotional intelligence is like, I learned something from it, or at least I try to, right? Like I said, if I'm sitting, I do something, I sit in my office, or I do something on an incident scene, and it's like, man, I really screwed that up. I can hide from it, or I could just reflect on it and be like, all right, what went wrong here? What did I do? Whether it's a conversation with somebody, the way I treated somebody, a decision I made, like, how can I not do this again? And it, if I do that, and I think if most people do that, they won't have that regret, right? And they won't have that fear of not making any more decisions. Like, well, let me just learn from this, realize that I'm fallible, and just move on from it. And while it was a mistake, there's no regret there, and it's not going to bog me down from not wanting to try again, or not wanting to make
Yeah.
another decision, or not wanting to, have this type of conversation with somebody because I really screwed it up last time. Like that reflection and that, having that emotional intelligence about you is important, because it's going to continue to happen, right? I can go to work on Friday and make a huge mistake, and it's like, damn it, like, you know, just because it's been going really good for so long doesn't mean it's going to stay that way. And and I think it was Babe Ruth said something like, what do you say, like, yesterday's home run doesn't win tomorrow's game. So kind of that mindset, like,
Yeah.
you know you be careful and have some humility about you, because you can have another mistake tomorrow, but the important thing is you got to learn from it and not hide from it.
The the one area that has really, and I'm probably, it's a chapter that I'll probably just have to read and and over again, is the chapter 5 is building your team, and you talk about areas that you use for that, trust, accountability, communication, sense of purpose, and appreciation. And I feel like for me, the bookends of that, I do okay at. Trust, I feel like, kind of like the things we talked about earlier, the
Mhm.
training,
Yep.
doing things to build trust, build respect. I feel like I'm decent at that. The appreciation, I could do better. Everybody could do better about it, but
Sure.
I don't feel like that's just a downfall for me. But man, everything in the middle, that is where I'm struggling at. And I think you even kind of talk about, communication is something you struggle with.
Sure. Yep.
But like that accountability, that it's just I would say that's a character trait of mine. Is, I'm not somebody that likes confrontation.
Right.
I've always known that when I become an officer, that will be the biggest area that I'm going to have to overcome. And so, I feel like I put my vision out there. I put, okay, this is what we're going to be. This is what we're going to do. Lay it all out there. But I still struggle with that accountability piece. And it's almost like I want them to respect me to the level of, okay, we're going to do it because we respect them and
Hmm.
because that's the right thing to do. But it, it doesn't always work like that. You
Right. Right.
have to step up and hold them accountable. And I have struggled a lot with that here lately, especially.
Yeah, it's not easy. Like, I struggle with that too. Like, don't think because I put that in a book, I got that all figured out, right?
Oh
Like,
yeah.
that's
Oh, I
that's
know.
an active process for me too. Like,
Yeah.
even as of recently, I had a couple situations where it's like, like, again, I'm no different than a lot of people. Like, it rolled through my mind, like, you know what, I could probably just let this go. Like, they know my expectation, and do I even need to say something to them? And I mean, I sat on something for a couple days where it's like, nah, I'm not gonna have the conversation. It'll work itself out, right? But I know better than that. Like,
Yeah.
it just doesn't work that way. So, as uncomfortable as it may be, you just got to do it. And I think it's on your approach. Like, if you're somebody who has built that trust and you do try to openly communicate with your folks, that when you do sit down with them and you talk to them about a problem and you're holding them accountable, typically they know that that conversation was coming. Not all the time. um, but if you built up that trust, and you're a good clear communicator with them, and you sit down and you hold somebody accountable for something, like, they know that it's not personal, right? Like, you're there to work on the problem, you're there to hold them accountable because you've shared your expectations with them. And I think it makes it easier. um, it's certainly not going to be any less uncomfortable at times. Like, it's still sometimes awkward to have those conversations, but I think they're necessary, because the alternative is no accountability, right? And then that's not good for the station either. But those conversations are certainly not easy, and holding people accountable is difficult. But they would do the same to you, so you got to make sure you do it to them.
Yeah. And you talk about, if you're, I'll just read it. So you're talking about somebody that puts your values out there and puts out, what's important to you. But then if you aren't doing that, if you're not following through, if you aren't pushing people to be accountable to those expectations, and you're telling them that, it's not really important.
Right.
And that's another area that I have been so frustrated with myself is I know exactly what I want my crew to look like. I know exactly where I want to be and where I want to get as a crew. But I just, when it comes down to it, if I'm being honest, I'm not willing to do the work yet. I'm
Right.
just, I'm not there yet. And I don't understand why, because I want it so bad. But that's the only explanation I can give without coming up with excuses. And that is literally what I'm doing. It just take, for example, with something that I have tried to kind of implement is daily training.
Hmm.
Weekends, it, whatever, it doesn't matter. We're doing something. And
Yeah.
I know you've talked kind of the same, basically the same premise I've heard you talk about. I'm not expecting 8 hours of training,
Nope.
not
Right.
even close. Give me most of the morning to do something good, to learn something, to feel like I grew a little bit, and we're done. You can
Right.
have the rest of the day to chill out and get ready for that call.
Right.
But if I don't stand up every shift and take responsibility for saying, okay, we're doing this today, then it gets passed over. And
Yep.
that's exactly what I'm doing is I'm
Yeah.
showing them it's not really that important to
Yeah. Oh, trust me. Like I have, I've done that, right? And I share my expectations with my crew. They know what I expect of them. They know that we do training. But trust me, there are times where it's like I have something planned. I'm a human being, right? I'm not immune to laziness or complacency or anything like that. Like I have to take an active role and say, you know what? Nope, we're doing this today. And I think if you go do something and you train to a standard, right? We're not going to say, hey, we're going to go out here for 4 hours. We're going to do this. Like, hey, we're going to go out. We're going to do this skill. We have 4 hours to do it. But if we finish in 2, we're done. And like my style, and it's worked for me, and I don't know if it works for everybody, is I'm a fan of getting stuff done in the morning and then they're done. Kind of like you mentioned. Like if they go out and we drill for an hour or two and we get back to the station, I'd leave those guys hell alone, or at least I certainly try to. Like the day is theirs. I don't care if they take a nap. I don't care if they take a 5 hour nap. It doesn't. I don't care. I just don't. That's my style. Right.
you.
If they have to get up for calls, go for it. But I'm at a busy place. If they want to go lay down for a few hours, go lay down. But you know what? The trucks are right. The station's right. We did our training. That's what I ask of them. And I think if you continue with that type of approach and you say, hey guys, we're going to knock this out today, you do it with a positive attitude, you lead by example, it's going to make it easier for them to engage. And again, it's all in your approach, right? You create this environment where people enjoy doing training, they learn something, it's valuable, it's realistic. It's going to make it easier for you, right? Like, because it won't seem like a task at that point. It's just like, hey guys, let's knock this out. It's just part of our routine.
Yep.
It's valuable to us as a team. It creates that cohesion, and it doesn't seem like such a chore anymore. Because once it seems like a chore, then it's easier to, like my 7-year-old, he doesn't want to do any of his chores, right? We're no different. Like if we make it feel that way, then we likely will not want to do it. And it's difficult as officers. And I think that just goes back to that responsibility is, when we put those trumpets on our collar, we said that we would do this, even if it's not easy. A lot of people, they want to be captain, but they don't want to do captain, and I think if you're going to do captain, you gotta make sure that you're out there actually doing it, even when it's tough.
Yeah. And I don't know if it's my age or what, but yeah, if I allow, we'll get to the station some mornings and there'll be something going on that kind of eats up just enough of the morning to not eat up the whole morning, but not really give you much time to really get in. You know what I mean? That kind of
Yep, I do.
awkward. If if I go into that and say, all right, let's just take a lunch, get a little rest a little bit, and we'll get to it afterwards. Man, that is a freaking struggle to go from
Absolutely
resting
is.
and eating lunch, getting some motivation to get back into it. I'm sure there are a lot of people out there that need to hear this. If you struggle with that, knock it out in the morning because that is the
Yep.
best chance to do it.
It happens to me too. Like I said, I'm no different than anybody else listening to this podcast, right? Like that typically what happens when that happens, like I'll have this grand plan, like this is gonna work out great, and then just it doesn't
Yeah.
work. And then they eat lunch, typically they like to relax, and it's like, man, do I have a decision to make? Do I uproot them and go out and do this? Sometimes we do. It depends. If it's a priority for me, then we're going to do it. Or I just ask myself, you know what? Can I kick this to tomorrow? And it's really not a big deal in the grand scheme of things, right? Like, we didn't do any training today, but is it necessary? You know, is it, if it's necessary and it's a priority, maybe because there was something on an incident or there was a performance problem somewhere. Yep, we're doing it. Like, I don't care if we have to wait till 5 o'clock. We have to get this done. But if it's something that can wait and it's not a priority, and it's going to, you know, you have to feel the pulse of that crew, right? And you're going to know, like, if you get the feeling that, like, they're not going to take anything away from it because of the timing, for me, I will likely just push it off. Some things I won't. Again, it just depends on the circumstances. It depends on the background of why we're doing the training. If it's just simply, hey, we haven't looked at the department load in a while, we're going to knock it out this morning, calls interrupted, whatever stuff comes up, and it's the afternoon and we had a busy morning, and they're like, oh, time to relax. It's like, you go, you know, you like open the door to the day room, and they're all just sitting there relaxed, and it's like, all right, guys, we're gonna, at that moment, it's like, you have to make a decision as an officer, right? Do I uproot them from their comfy recliners and take them downstairs and do some training for a couple hours? Sometimes the answer is yes, but you have to know that it all goes back to being involved and knowing that crew. And if you set those expectations early with them, and you do take them out there and you peel them off the sofas, I don't think they're going to disrespect you for it. I think they're going to understand, because that's what you believe in and that's what you expect of them. But again, we talk about work, family life balance. There's got to be that healthy balance in the station too, right? There's plenty of times where, some people in my department, they think I'm like the boogeyman when it comes to training, but there's been plenty of times when, we don't do anything in the station because, like, we just get beat up on calls. I look back at stuff and I'm like, man, we've done stuff every day for the last 4 or 5 shifts, and it's been a busy cycle. I'll come in the next day and just, I won't tell them like, hey, holiday routine, you guys just do whatever you want, but I won't schedule anything, right? I'll leave them alone that day. They just essentially do whatever they want. They still have that mission first mindset, right? Like, they're focused on what they need to be doing, and stuff kind of comes up ad hoc, but I try to find that balance in the station too. It's important for firefighters to have downtime. You have to find balance in your approach. The people that go to fire alarms and they're stretched on every call, like medical call. If I stretched on every medical call, I went to those guys to stretch those 15, 16 times a day. Sometimes I'm not doing that stuff. Like, it's got to be local, and you got to know and feel the crew out, because you can turn them the opposite direction, and you won't get anything out of them if you approach it the wrong way.
Yeah, absolutely. That is something that I really think is a focus with every piece of life, is that balance.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter what you're talking about. Both wide ends of the spectrum of any topic is probably not the best place to be. It's always somewhere in the middle.
Yep. And I've learned that the hard way. All right.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
I'm just not pulling out of thin air. Like, I've been that guy who has pushed people, and then, I've had somebody come up to me and be like, hey, Lou, the guys, they could probably use, let's just give them a day off today. Like, they could use it. I'm like, oh wow, like, I don't, like, let's do it. Like, Lou, just trust me. Like, just, they're still going to do good things for you, but just give them the day. Like, I have to listen to that. Got it. So again, it's all about that balance.
And I think maybe that's kind of part of the fight I am dealing with right now, of kind of what I talked about earlier, is, this is something new. Daily training is not the culture of my department. Far from
Right.
it.
Mm-hmm.
So I am doing something that has, quite honestly, has been really frowned upon by anybody that's ever done it in the past.
Sure.
It just doesn't happen. And so I try to kind of keep that in mind, and try to maybe slowly work it in. And it's like, okay, how do I do this appropriately? What's too much? What's not enough? What is showing that it's a priority, but still not it's okay to have off days. It's
Yeah.
like, gosh, and it's
It's not easy,
so
is it?
touchy.
Yeah.
No, no.
And one thing that helps me too is I'll put it back on them, like we'll have lineup and I'll go around and say, hey, look, over the next couple months, I'm going to try to put some training together for everybody, but I want your input. Like, is there something you could be really good at it? You could feel like you need some improvement on it. Like, I want a topic from everybody. Just, you don't have to give it to me right now, but just think about it over the next couple days and then bring it to me. And then that's the training that you do and you involve those people, and now it's a collective. Like, it's not just me saying you're going to do the training. It's something that, that Chris said he wanted to do or Matt said he wanted to do. And so we do it again for the team, but it's like this is not coming directly from me. Like you may be choreographing the whole thing, but it was their idea and it includes them and it involves them and there's nothing better than like having a training opportunity or like doing some training and then going out and seeing the immediate benefit of it, because that is a win for you as an officer. I've had that a couple times where I've seen some reservation like, hey Cap, why are we doing this? And I'll never forget this one guy. Like we're stretching lines off the truck, and I'm like, this is how I expect the line to be. Now I'm coupling to the door, and he was just like doing the zipper like back and forth, stretching the line, and I'm like, look, I'm not going to say that's not going to get the job done, but this is what I expect. This is what I want to see. This is what I want. So he does it. We clear up. We go in service. An hour later, we go to a fire, and it was a fatality fire. I mean, the whole house burnt, slam up. The guy stretches the line beautifully, like perfect. And he walks right up to me and goes, hey, Cap, what do you think, huh? And I'm like, I told you, buddy. Like they immediately see the value in that training. And, if you can have that happen as an officer, that's solid gold, because they're like, man, maybe this captain's onto something. Maybe there is some value in some of the stuff that we're doing. Like, and firefighters want to feel good about, they want to be competent in their jobs. And if you can give them the tools and the resources to be good at their job, they become confident. And if they're confident, they're happy and they have high morale. And they may not say it to you, but when they transfer or when they go somewhere else, they'll realize the benefit of what you did for them. They may not see it right then, they may not voice it, but I guarantee you, when they go somewhere else and they don't do any of that stuff and they're helping other people, it's going to be like, oh man, maybe that guy was onto something over there. Like we had a good thing. We were doing some good stuff and there's value in it.
Yeah. Something you mentioned just in that discussion is getting the input of your people and getting their ideas of what they wanted. Man, I've had a few times where some of my firefighters have kind of created a small class or brought up discussions, and man, I love that. And that kind of
Absolutely.
goes back into your appreciation. I want to make sure they know I appreciate that, because that's a big deal.
Of
It's
course.
hard being the person to come up with these ideas or the plan every single day. It's
Yep.
so nice to have help with that.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I try to bounce it off them, and because I tell my folks, like, if you're going to think you're going to come to work and get everything you need from me, like you're wrong. One, you got to go out, take other classes, listen to other people, but I need your input too. This is how we all get better.
Yeah. I'm trying to look at the time here. I want to be respectful of your time. I think probably kind of wrap it up here a little bit, but
Mhm.
I'll end it with this, and I think it's my favorite quote of the book so far that I've seen. Is you say unit cohesion is the ultimate killer of low morale, and I think that's awesome. And yeah, I couldn't agree more. I love that comment. Is that something that just kind of came to you? How did that come about?
So that Air Force colonel I was talking about, I was actually doing my EFO program up at Emmitsburg, and he was talking a lot about unit cohesion and morale. And, you know, I just essentially, crammed into a couple, that sentence, what he was explaining. And he went on to talk about the problems that can come into a small team and the morale problems and symptoms of bad morale. And then he got into how to fix it. And these are the steps that you need to do to create unit cohesion. And I'm like, it's just as simple as that. It's like unit cohesion crushes, like it's the ultimate antidote for low morale. And like I've seen that in the firehouse. Like we were talking about earlier about just people sitting around and griping at the galley table and things that they can't control. That's a symptom, right? And typically the disease is the unit cohesion. And, again, it starts with the officer. And I'll leave you with this little example. Like, we had a pay problem in our department that I mentioned when I talk about this, and it was the talk of the town for probably a few months. Like, people weren't getting paid. They were like way overpaid, not paid at all. It was just a mess, right? And it was just all anybody ever talked about. And it was a problem. I'm not going to say it was, right? But I had a problem. I didn't get paid one check and they messed it all up. But when I came to work and I stood there in front of the lineup, what did I not do? I didn't sit there and gripe about the pay problem, right? It was just, I rolled on. Like, there were people in my firehouse that had pay problems. They knew I was going to take care of it, but I wasn't all day like, can you believe the city manager? Can you believe pay? Like, we didn't make a day of it. We talked about doing our jobs, right? We just talked about trying to be good firefighters, and it kept them focused on that cohesion. And I think if you keep people focused on that cohesion, that other stuff just kind of trickles away, right? They shift their focus onto what they need to be doing. and that's ultimately what you want to achieve as an officer, with all the stuff that we talked about, right? The being involved in training, the trust, the communication, that stuff builds cohesion and family and all that. And when a problem like anything creeps in, like, I'll give you one more. We had our long process for a fire chief, and like, our union, God bless them, I'm a union guy. Like, they were, like, griping about the city manager needs to make a decision and they need to let us know, like, this affects morale, like, in the fire department with not having a chief. And I'm thinking to myself, like, does it? Like, not at my level. Like, I told the guys, like, one day I literally said to them, they were talking about not having a fire chief. I said, let me ask you a question, guys. Like, if they don't pick a fire chief for the next year, how does that affect us right here in this firehouse?
Yeah.
Well, it doesn't, right? It doesn't. We can come to work. We focus on being good firefighters, right? Like, swinging axes and setting Halligans, stretching lines, doing good searches, providing good EMS care. Like, it doesn't affect us. Like, let's focus on what we need to do. Like, let's focus on our cohesion. The fire chief thing will take care of itself. But don't get bogged down in those weeds of things, again, that we have no control over, right? Because we start doing that and down goes morale and down goes cohesion. And as the officer, you're the one who's gotta keep them on track.
Yeah, and that's exactly where I want to be, right there in that mindset of that's the focus, trying to build that unit cohesion, trying to battle that never ending, low morale, bad attitude, all that is just, it's always there. You just got to find ways to keep fighting it. And I totally agree. That is the absolute best way to do it, is have a strong team. So
Yep,
that's,
absolutely.
I think that is a great place to tie it up for now. I've got several notes. I hope that someday I'll get you back on and we can dig more into some of that other stuff as well.
Yeah,
But
man, I'd love to. Let's do it.
really enjoyed kind of where this whole thing went. And so I appreciate it. I learned a
Yeah,
lot from
absolutely.
you
Thanks
today.
for having me. I enjoyed doing it. It was a good one.
So we talked about your trial by fire page. Let everybody out there know kind of what you have going. You got classes. We talked about the book,
Mhm.
whatever you want to kind of put out there and how they can get a hold of you.
Yep. So some stuff coming up as far as the classes. I'm hoping that, like a lot of other people, things start to go back to a sense of normal. So I'll be at FDIC. I'll be at North Carolina at their conference down there. I just submitted for FRI down in Charlotte, North Carolina. So I got some classes that are starting to pop up, and I'll put those on the social media page, so people are in the area, they can stop in and register and be a part of the class. But everything's right there on the Facebook page for Trial by Fire. As far as the book, you can grab it off Amazon. What I'll say, there's departments that want to buy a bunch, and I have no Amazon people are listening. But if you want to buy a lot, don't buy them on Amazon. Just email me directly, and I can get you a bunch and save you a bunch of money. But that's the easiest. If you're gonna get a book or two, Amazon's the way to go. But if you're gonna buy a good handful, just email me directly, and we'll work it out from there. That's
Perfect.
it, man.
Sounds good. And I appreciate, I like saying this to people like you that have been doing this for a while. I appreciate you for what you've done to the fire service. I love meeting people that are making things better and fighting the fight. So thank you for that.
Absolutely.
And
Thank you.
again, thank you for your time and look forward to what is going to be coming from you in the future.
All right. Well, thanks for having me, brother. I'll talk to you soon.
See ya.